Video coverage of the 27th JCT Traffic Signal Symposium is brought to you by Highways News, thanks to our sponsors AGD Intelligent Traffic Systems, Clearview Intelligence, PTV Group, Message Maker Displays, Smart Video and Sensing, SRL and TRL.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Sorry. No. Yeah. Right. So when I started the presentation off, we've been working on junction 25 of the junction 25 of the M6. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I've got a few projects going on. And we've also got a project to do with the A57 in Greater Manchester. And the whole idea of this presentation come from sharing best practice amongst traffic signal engineers and planners. So this is some work that I'll be doing internally within National Highways. And I'm seeing more and more requests for throughabouts. And I've been talking to one of my colleagues over there. So the whole presentation, when I come up with a title, was about throughabouts and double throughabouts. I came up with a conversation piece with one of my friends, a pork pie or a hamburger. And that seemed more appropriate because it actually was a fun factor and it gets your notice. So when I'm going to do this presentation more, it's sort of developed. Anyway, so on junction 25 of the M6, we've been working with John Broadman from Amy, Deepa, and for the presentation, do you want to hold your hand up, Mark? So Mark has helped me with a few bits. I've changed my presentation slightly, Mark. I put your bit at the end as an appendix. But Mark is a planner. Am I right? A planner? Yeah, okay. So what I've tried to do is sort of look at the life cycle of a design. Because when I looked at the presentation timing, I could have taken an hour to do this. I've sort of put Mark stuff at the end, if that makes sense, Mark. Sorry. And the whole idea really was to look at the life cycle of somebody comes up with a design. You know, where did the traffic signal engineers sit in this? Where did they? And it's different in national highways, but a lot of our designs we work with local authorities. Sometimes we take local authority designs and implement them ourselves and then hand them back. There's a whole different thingy. And you can almost think of national highways as a series of local authorities because we've got different areas. We've got DBFO contracts. We've got different relationships within all those. We've got different contractors. So nothing is done the same uniquely in national highways. Everybody does it slightly different. So part of the process, what I'm doing is to make my conscience clear. So we are doing things uniformly as a big organisation because national highways have gone through a lot of changes and we've had a lot of staff 2P in. And we also employ a lot of consultants. And one of the big things, and this is said elsewhere in this, is we have lots of consultants. And often a consultant picks up a design from another consultant, and that might happen 2 or 3 times over the years. So we start doing a scheme, and for whatever reason it falls apart, no money, no will. You know, the investment in that area isn't going to go ahead because they're not going to build the industrial estate or the whatever infrastructure. Deepa's doing some work on HS2, so things like that are coming on board. So this is my corporate spiel about safety. As an organisation, one of our imperatives is safety, and everybody else has their own mission statements. Won't linger too much on that really, but eventually, I sit in the connected and autonomous vehicle team, and we've sort of touched on it several times. I think a lot of our technology is going to go into vehicle. And we're also going to have road pricing, which I don't think anybody has talked about. And I think eventually, for the cars that haven't got a computer in them, they're all going to have some sort of satellite navigation system in so they can be charged and tracked. And that will act as the computer in the car, and that will end up sending data back to whoever collects that data. Obviously, more modern cars will have that automatically, and the challenge is how do you keep the SIM cards working? And obviously, a lot of these systems, when somebody buys a car, will last for 3 years or 2 years. And the model of a lot of new car manufacturers is to sell data. And you have to purchase those systems off them, and you have to keep them alive. But obviously, if your SIM card goes down, then obviously, if your car isn't in warranty, why do you need to fix it? And a lot of the car manufacturers now are coming to the likes of national highways and local authorities to sell data, and that is a massive market that nobody has ever talked about. Anyway, but that isn't today's subject. So has anybody here worked on the whole issue of challenge of whether to go for a throughabout or a hamburger? Hand up? A few. So I don't know if people call them pork pie roundabouts. I think it's sort of a novelty factor, and and it's something that people know about. The challenge that you've got is where you've got high traffic flows, etc., you have to think outside of the norm. And obviously that's where we get our hamburger. This is junction 25, slightly different junction. A traditional double hamburger. Sometimes you get hot cross bun, and I'm calling this, so people call them different things, and they've all got different purposes, depending where the traffic flows are heavier, you're taking it across. Has anybody been through junction 19? Sorry, junction 19, sorry, yeah, I know what it is. Has anybody been through junction 19 a lot on the M6? No. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. So what they had to do, they had to build a new bridge section in the middle. So this cost in the order of £90 million. So it's not an inconsiderable sum. But they'd upgraded the road from here to the M56. So obviously this is a major route from the M6 into Manchester, Manchester Airport, football traffic, etc. So this is a really heavily trafficked road. You've also got the vehicles that would come off here, go towards Chester and North Wales. It's sort of an alternative route then going a little bit further up and going across the M56. So they'd upgraded the other road, but we were getting queues back onto the M6. So that's one of the reasons it was upgraded. So just an overview, really, of the scheme, and obviously there's different priorities. This was a design and build, so the contractor was given some key criteria on how long the junction had to last before there was another intervention. So one of the little projects that I'm working on at the moment is using some floating point data to work out the capacity of the junction, whether we got queues. And we've had some slight sort of modelling information. So I'm looking at sort of doing some modelling now and using that floating point data to actually look at it, how the junction is used, and if we need to change the timing of the traffic signals. So there are sections of free flow and there are sections of traffic signals. And we've also done some work with the local authority, and I was going to call it Cheshire County Council. It might be East Cheshire there, on where our traffic signals interlink with theirs. I won't read all John Broadman's comments out, because he's got his own opinions, and he would have liked to be here today. And the idea when when I originally proposed this, was Deepa and John were going to do the presentation and I was going to assist them, and I wasn't going to do any talking. That was the whole idea of this. But John did the design, but I think one of John's biggest issues was that he'd already got a design that other people had. And also the actual amount of stakeholder involvement that we have. Another scheme I had in London, and that's Junction 25, the M25, and that's why I get confused, and I was talking about it before. We had a bit of a conversation with one of the stakeholders, and that resulted in a judicial review. So a lot of the stuff that we get involved with, we have to do a lot of stakeholder engagement, and it takes a long time to go through the whole process. Where am I? Yeah, sorry, it's on the next page. So John's bit there is be wary of using multiple consultants. And National Highways, probably like a lot of local authorities, we don't have that knowledge in-house. We have to buy that in. So we have Amy, who's doing some of the design, and McAlpine as a joint venture. And as Deepa will explain in a minute, Deepa and WSP are there as acting as sort of technical assurance, looking at the design, and we worked quite closely in the early stages to make sure what they're doing is safe, and we're still working on issues now. So when it gets handed over into maintenance and its future life, it's safe and it operates as we expect it to. But I think it's having the right people involved at the initial concept to make sure it all works. And it's the main issue that I had. This was one of the only major project schemes that I've ever worked on where the actual principal project engineer or project manager was a traffic signal engineer. So in the early days of this scheme, I wasn't very heavily involved. But the person who actually was the project manager used to be a traffic signal engineer. And it's very, very rare that we have, it's the first one I come across in 6 or 7 years doing these type of schemes, that we've had a traffic signal engineer as a major, the principal project manager. I don't know if anybody else had that with any schemes? Or are you always competing against the project manager thinking they know best and questioning what you do? I think that's quite common. So it's having that multiple disciplinary team and everybody buying in. The other difficulty that we always have, and probably everybody else, is the nice word value engineering. All of a sudden the scheme is getting to the end of its build and they're running out of money. The first thing that they look at cutting is either the quality of the kit, the amount of kit, or a mixture of how it's deployed or how it's installed. And it's not always the cheapest kit is the most reliable. And we're trying, one part of the business is looking at the whole life costs of the kit and the whole life costs of the junction, reducing congestion, safety and everything else. And then the bean counters are looking at the elements of, well, we're overspending, where can we save some money? So my part of this is, so we've had it built, then we're going to get it handed back into maintenance. One of the major issues that you have with throughbouts, hamburgers, is the operation of it. How do you do maintenance? What happens if there's an accident? What happens if the traffic signals go out? And one of the things that we're trying to develop a little bit more is a standardised way of doing a risk assessment. I've got a scheme on the A57 where we have lots of lorries and we have lots of horses. They've only provided one Pegasus crossing. And what I'm saying to them is, that's not enough. Have you done a risk assessment on the amount of horses and the cyclists? But if the throughbaut section if there is a problem with the throughobout section, because there's an accident or the lights go out, it doesn't operate like a normal roundabout. Then you've got to think about how long is it going to take somebody to get there. And the example I'll give you is a throughobout that we're working on in Bodmin. So if we had a fault there, it could take 10 hours for the engineer to get there. And I say 10 hours, that is a worst case scenario. The engineer lives near Swindon. And on a summer Saturday, to get from Swindon to Bodmin, down the M4 and down the M5, could take you 10 hours. So if there was a fault, what do you do? So in that circumstance, your risk assessment is, you're going to have to close a roundabout off. You're going to have cones thingy. And we're looking at working closely with Cormac on that one. And obviously, when we do maintenance and obviously working with the police, they've got to know what happens if there is an incident there. Because obviously, it's not like a normal roundabout where you have to give way to your right only. A throughobout, you would also have to give way to the left. So you're going to have lots of potential accidents. Junction 19, John put in a UPS for 24 hours. And the debate I've got with him at the moment, he did the design, I couldn't challenge. I think it's over-engineered putting a UPS for 24 hours on that junction. The question is, how long does it take to get an engineer there? How long does it take them to get back to the depot, perhaps get the spare parts that they need, perhaps get a generator? And what I haven't mentioned is all the traffic signals at throughabouts should have some sort of connector that you can hook up a generator, because if you don't know how long the power is going to be off, at least you can put a generator there and operate it. Obviously, that brings other issues of theft of the generator and how do you keep the fuel added. So when we're looking at giving some more guidance on UPSs, we're looking at the likelihood of it happening. How long do we mitigate it for? So I've given you the example of the one that we've got at Bodmin. If they had to go back to their depot, fortunately, they've got a depot at the Saltash Tunnel. Talent or Balfour Beatty, who used to be the contractor there, have just been the contract's just been taken over. But the engineer has to travel down from Swindon. They've got a depot at the Saltash Tunnel. Well, the Saltash Tunnel is only about an hour and a half away, worst case scenario. So they can perhaps keep some parts in their depot locally. But we're all looking at costs and how things work. And obviously, you have to document this. We've got this battle of all the time. I have to think about, well, if I get a question from a coroner, do I have the records to keep that in line? So, sorry, Deepa, this is your bit.
Thanks, Jonathan. So, the scheme that Jonathan's used as an example, M6 Junction 19, is one of the many schemes that have been involved in undertaking technical assurance role, supporting National Highway and Jonathan. So my role, or the TA's role, is to make sure that all the risk assessments and all the design reviews are undertaken. So WSP have been undertaking technical assurance role as a multidisciplinary team. We've got accredited technical assurers who review designs produced for national highways. And our role is not to be the checker or the approver. We just assure the designs. So they still need to be checked, approved. And what we do is an independent review, be a critical friend, start, if we are involved from the beginning, work with the designers and the design team to ensure that the requirements of the scheme are met, any high risks are identified, and we don't just check for signatures, we make sure everything's checked and approved, but we work with National Highways and protect their, so when the site is installed, there are no issues on site, that everything is covered in a design log and covering national highways, protecting them as well, from liability. At least, all the paperwork is undertaken. So one of the recommendations from the role we have undertaken, using M6 Junction 19 as an example, and other cut-through roundabouts, is they have quite a number of risks. It's not like a standard roundabout. There's could be more conflicts on site. To think about the maintenance, so it's making sure all the high-level requirements and it's all met. So next slide, please. Sorry about that. Some of the recommendations from the technical assurance process we've undertaken is, subject to budget and risk, appoint a technical assurer as early into the process. So if a scheme is complex, it's recommended that you have an independent person to review the design. You have a checker, you have an approver, but pass it to an independent person who can look at it holistically and make sure all the processes are followed, the risks are all identified, and they can be your partner or your critical friend in supporting you in trying to get decisions approved. Like Jonathan mentioned earlier, many designs go through multiple consultants before it gets to the detailed design stage, and the decisions are taken. You already are stuck with the layout, and sometimes you need that support to be able to, be your voice in trying to identify the risk and get the support you need in getting the design changed or the risk managed. And a few things that we check and make sure is that the design team maintains a design log. They record their design decisions. Again, if it is logged, recorded, if there is an issue on site, and like Jonathan mentioned earlier, if they have to go to the court or there's an inquiry, there's all the supporting evidence that it has gone through all the processes and risk assessments, and the evidence is available. Ensuring that all, get confirmation from the design team that they have undertaken design reviews and there's no non-compliances or departure. We do ask questions. We are not there, just suggest. We are not there to enforce anything. We can't say, we are not the designers. So we just make sure that they, confirm that there are no departures if it's not logged in the design log. And operational performance is something for roundabouts and any junction traffic signal site. You're installing something, on the traffic network, make sure it will work. There is a high-level requirement for most of, national highway schemes. So it is ensuring that it has been modeled and it is expected to operate well on site. And if it is not, and if it's not expected to meet the high-level requirement, it's ensuring that National Highways or the project management team are aware of it and it's approved. And the other item is maintaining agents. It's also ensuring that they are aware of the scheme and they understand what they are going to inherit and they're happy with it. So it's just ensuring all the processes have been followed. Thanks, Jonathan.
So we have a major problem. A lot of the time, the scheme gets completed, but doesn't get taken into maintenance because the maintenance contractor isn't happy about an element of it. So I tend to get, my example I was given before about Bodmin, the maintainer is Balfour Beatty, or was Balfour Beatty, and now is Telent. So I've been engaging with the maintenance contractor on how they would operate it and whether it's feasible for them to maintain it, or is it better for some elements of the local council. So it's Cormac are the maintainer for Cornwall's roads. So we've got this conversation going on at the moment, even though we're still in the design stage. How will it be operated and how will it be maintained? So we're looking at the whole life of this. And we can have those conversations early rather than it, we get given it into maintenance and the maintenance contractor says, no, we can't deliver what you expect. That point we're too late. And obviously it's very critical then because they can almost negotiate what they want. If we're trying to give them something, they can negotiate a price of whatever they want because we've got no leverage against them saying no. So looking for the future, we're working on a lot of things for our network, but obviously we're trying to make a safe and resilient network, but we've also talked about the sort of connectivity and data we get from of our network. But what we don't talk about is the electrification of our network and how that might look. And when I go back to the UPS thing, the more electric vehicles that we've got, the more likelihood of us having power cuts, and the more likelihood of us having outages on our key bits of infrastructure. And that's something we never thought about in the past, but we need to be thinking about in the future. But also, do we really want to have UPSs? Are UPSs the right thing to do? Or do we have to think about sacrificing some of our technology when we get power outages? So lots of stuff like that. I'm at my point of any questions, but for those who want to sort of see a little bit about what Mark's written, it's right at the end, but I won't go there at the moment because I think everybody wants to go home, and I'll leave it there.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan and Deepa. Again, any hands? Right. Well, I think the core subject, throughbouts, I'm going to call them. There are some very interesting issues that relate to them specifically. I think some of the earlier comments in your presentation about the designs, as a signals person, the geometric design of a throughbaut is absolutely critical. I won't mention sites, but there have been a number. It's
important to add. So for us, we've got a departure from standard process. So any Hamburger needs a departure from standard. So in national highways, that's another team. We have a Safer Roads team who deal with geometry, and that used to be Sandra Brown, used to be the team leader, and I don't know if anybody's dealt with Sandra. Sandra's retired a few months ago, and I don't think she's been replaced yet. So her team look after geometry, and one or two of her team are actually based where I am in Exeter. So I'm quite lucky that I can have those conversations with them, and they're local people to me, and one or two of them I used to work with. So I'm quite lucky to have those conversations, and we get to hear about things, and that's where we can add value. As I work in SES, Safety Engineering Standards in National Highways, and that's where we can add value to the project manager and potentially stop redesign work, because obviously people don't know what our requirements are, and we can have that design input. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I think that was the sort of point I was trying to make, because certainly in the past there have been a number of sites on the SRN which suffered because, particularly on throughbouts with turning movements, the alignments of those emerging carriageways onto the circulatory and then exiting junctions actually resulted in very poor performance levels of those junctions. So getting that element of it right, so it suits the signals, is absolutely.
It was interesting with Junction 19. The very first weekend it was open, they had an accident on the opposite, not on our network, but they had to close part of the throughbout. They had to close the other side of the network off, and we discovered that the circulatory on the throughabout didn't work very well, because obviously people were going round it to try and get to the other side of the roundabout. And we learned something about a model that isn't in any model. And so we're doing some tweaks on the mover configuration. And John has been doing some work in the last week, and we've moved stop lines, and we've done some work, and whether that will, but it's almost like saying we can think about everything when we're doing the design, we can do all the modelling, but until we actually create something and see what happens, but a lot of it might not be in our hands when we do, when we turn them on and make it work. We just don't know what the consequences are, because we can't think about absolutely everything.
Yeah, but obviously, there are a lot of very experienced people, signals people around that have probably experienced a lot of those things. So it's great to make use of that experience. No hands up at all yet? No? Tom, could we have a microphone to the middle, please?
I was just trying to clarify what was just being said there. So we're looking at a throughabout roundabout that if there were a collision or something that needed the closure of the cut through to be implemented, that there is significant concern about the performance of the circulatory and the additional traffic that's going to help, that'll have to cope with.
So I don't know the full story of what happened. This was the weekend that it opened. So whether people... So one of the issues that I have with Junction 19, there was a temporary speed limit while they were building it. And obviously throughabouts, you never have it at full speed anyway. So they took the temporary speed limit off, but the new speed limit was the same as a temporary speed limit. So... And it had just opened, so we were getting, obviously, vehicles, the police were saying vehicles were travelling much faster. So, but also, it happened on the weekend it first got turned on. So we've got this thing of people are on, people have seen it built, but they don't know how it operates. You've got this thing of the speed limit changes, so lots of new factors. And people didn't know how to make it work, and they were going round twice, and that was causing lots of congestion. So I don't know, there could be 1,000,001 reasons, but so when you design it, we looked at the sort of data, or some of the data that they had, and obviously John was on site, so he was able to sort of say, that's not working, what can we do? And do we need a different sort of configuration when the cut through is closed? I haven't been involved with that, and John would be able to answer that. So I'm answering half of your question, and half of it I can't answer.
Okay, because just to me, you would design a throughabout because the circulatory can't cope with the amount of traffic that would be circulating around it. So whilst, yes, I can see that you could have some kind of special plan or timings that are implemented if that were a case, but that's to actually design those and test those is very, very challenging, because once it's open, you don't want to close the cut through, and by design, the circulatory must have restricted capacity. And
I think it was fortunate. John was on site when it happened, and he was able to make some notes and was able to, that's the beauty of, so hopefully this is going to be a lot more robust now, having, so in effect what I'm probably saying is you want to sit there and have all the incidents happen, everything go wrong in the first few days of having it open, so you can learn your lessons, put them into practice and walk away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Also, really good to hear about the technical assurance role from Deepa. I think that's something that a lot of clients should be thinking about. So thank you for that. If we can thank our speakers, thank you.